When is the last time you listened to a podcast about web development, web design, and small business and didn't fall asleep? Yes, we cover web development, web design, and small business, but like actual human beings with personalities. If you're a beginner, we're not going to talk over your head. It's more like asking your buddy for help. We have guests, we have fun, and let me tell you, these two can get off on a tangent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HTML All the Things Podcast. This is Matt Lawrence and Mike Curran.
That's what, everybody. We are back, and this is episode 217. Working title currently, but this episode is all about dynamic content. Probably come up with something more flashy than that, but we're going to be talking about what dynamic content is and how it powers websites and why it's important for you to pay attention to it, because it seems like something that's kind of always been there, has been there for a long time, but when you take a look at a website, which we're going to today, and take a look at a live website, a modern website, let's say, it's really important that you get these concepts down. So if this sounds interesting to you and you want to support the show, you can go check us out on that Patreon, leave a review or rating on your podcast app, join us in our Discord server, or share this with your friends. And just a little self-plug, our Discord server is going to be undergoing some renovations. It's still going to be the same community and all that. That's not what I'm saying. We're just going to be changing up a lot of the channels and how we process new users and stuff like that. That is hopefully coming soon. So if you've ever been like, man, this Discord server is in disarray and I'm out of here, it's time to maybe come back, because we're working on some stuff to clean it up and revitalize it a little bit. But anyway, on to this episode, which is, of course, about dynamic content. And before we dive into the importance of dynamic content, what it is, and, well, I guess we're diving into what it is, but why it needs to be looked after so specifically, we're going to dive into just the definition of it. What is it? And dynamic content in the context of a website refers to content that is constantly changing, updating, and evolving. Almost like it's being dynamic, if you will. So dynamic content, in probably its simplest form, are just blog posts where an author writes up a piece on a piece of content on a CMS and then publishes that post on the website. And that post is automatically, by the website's back end and design, is given its own page, and it's complete with styling, a unique URL, and unique metadata for things like SEO, or maybe you're styling, getting the pictures and the titles and everything ready for some Open Graph tags. You can share it on Facebook and other social media networks that are compatible with that, things like that. And from the web dev / web design standpoint, like I said, this is a simple example, the blog post, but it's also probably the prime example of dynamic content. And this is because a single template is created with HTML and CSS and any other applicable technologies out there. And then that template is filled in with the author's unique content. Sort of like an actual fill in the blank page. In the template, there's a blank for the main content, another blank for the title, another blank for the author's name. And those things will be filled in based on what the author has filled in the CMS. Now, beyond this single page that is generated for the post, this dynamic content starts to spill over into other parts of the website as well, into things like post listings, where blog posts are listed in content boxes for users to scan through and then click on to read. If you go to any major website, say IGN.com or other blogs out there, what you're mostly looking at is content boxes. There's a featured image, there's a title, maybe the date of the article, maybe the author, maybe a little excerpt, all different types of designs. But you're looking at these content boxes, and these are lists of what is on the site. And so it's important to realize that dynamic design is not just the single page template where I write up something in the CMS and it generates this page. This information is spilling over into other parts of the site. And these sections and these areas that are being shaped and filled in by this dynamic data is generally entirely powered by the publication of the blog posts. Someone is not going in and adding blog posts to the post listings across the site. Someone is not going into even let's say the HTML All the Things website, someone is not going in, like I'm not going in there. And if I write a new post about this podcast, I'm filling in my show notes. And when I fill in all the stuff, the images, the this, the that, and I publish it, the site gets updated. Yeah, there is a single page generated where I can read through all the show notes, see the title, play the episode right there, all those type of things, see the timestamps if applicable, or if I had time to do them that week. But the thing is that the front page is also being updated. It has content boxes, and I think there's 3 of them. And you can scroll down, you can see it, and it has the latest one on the far left, or on the top if you're on mobile, and it shows you this stuff. And this is not, I'm not going in and making that content box. I'm simply filling in the blanks, if you will, in the CMS for the podcast episode. And then the front page area where the podcast is housed is taking that data and dynamically sort of creating and filling in these content boxes. And so you can start to see where this is starting to get more powerful, and you start to see how it's starting to affect more parts of the website other than just the singular blog post page. And this ultimately is where dynamic content can get really powerful, advanced, more granular, maybe wholly above. And this is with the addition of CMS controls that automatically put these blog posts into specific parts of a website. So for example, if your site's homepage has a listing of, say, 3 posts right at the top of the page, and below that is a list of all the other posts on the site, the top 3 posts might be featured. Let's say that those are the featured stories. And these prime featured spots are reserved for those featured stories. So you can empower the author with a toggle switch, the writer of this content. They'll have a toggle switch in the editor, in the CMS, and they can toggle it on or off for whether it's a featured story or whether it's not. Just by toggling that switch on, the story will, once published, automatically appear in the featured section and will not appear in the list below those featured stories. And oftentimes, since there are only 3 featured stories, it'll be limited to those 3 featured stories. If someone writes a new one, it's not going to add a 4th, a 5th, a 6th. It will bump the oldest featured story out automatically out of the 3. Now, of course, you can get more granular with this, and you can make it so that some of them are fixed, or maybe there's another field that keeps them there longer and stuff like this. But for the sake of this basic example, you can start to already see how website pages, like the whole homepage of many sites, is just filled with content boxes that are pulled from pieces of content, video posts, written posts, external things like tweets, different things like testimonials, all these things, they're coming from dynamic data. This is why it is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned exactly what I was going to say right at the end there, where you can have dynamic content coming from a million different places now. One big one that I'm working with right now is e-commerce platforms. So if you have a blog and an e-commerce and a marketing site all in one, then it could happen where you have the standard CMS, something like Sanity, Prismic, WordPress, whatever, but you also have content like product data coming from something like Shopify. So that's 2 different sources of dynamic content that you have to deal with. Then you can have, like you said, Matt, social media posts as well being pulled in. So now you have 3 sources. You can have data being pulled in from another third-party analytics firm. That's 4 sources. Like, you can have so much stuff that you have to dynamically display in a coherent way on your site. That dynamic content is now just, it becomes the website, right? So you're just putting a skeleton together, and the engineering and design and UI challenge becomes, how do you put it together in a way where all this data from different sources can be displayed dynamically as it's being pushed in and updated and edited and created in a way that doesn't break the page in terms of, like, you know, if someone adds too many things here and if someone makes the text too large here, like, how much do you give control to the editors? We'll talk about that a little bit further down, but dynamic content is a really big part of web development. I just want to emphasize that right now. So people that are like, oh, I don't have to deal with that. Yeah, you will 100% have to deal with that if you're going into front end development, back end development, whatever. You're either going to be providing the dynamic content through back end, or you're going to be using it, serving it, and analyzing and displaying it with the front end. So it's part of everything at this point. If you're making a website, it's most likely going to have some sort of dynamic content.
And this can honestly be seen if you've ever, and I'm sure we have, gone to a website where, for whatever reason, just due to a fluke, or maybe if something's wrong with the site, the dynamic content fails to load. And you see this skeleton of a couple of content boxes that are more or less rectangles or circles or squares or whatever they are. But it's just like a background color. Maybe there's the odd lorem ipsum there, or maybe it literally says sample text or like fill me in or whatever it is. You can automatically see, whoa, this website does not have a lot of substance in it without dynamic content being pulled in and really powering the majority of the website in most cases. So we'll move on here to the importance of dynamic content. And you might think, I've just given some examples, and you might think what I've just gone through is obvious. Blogs have been powered by this for years at this point. This is a moot point. Obviously, people are writing content, and then that content's being condensed into these little content boxes that have the title and some other metadata. And then you click on one of them and you go to the actual single page where you can read the blog post. You may think, this is simple. This is easy. But I want to take a look at a real world example of something that really is not a blog. It has a blog, but it's not a blog, and that's AutoTrader. So earlier today, I went to autotrader.ca, and I want to be clear that this isn't sponsored by them or anything. I just went there randomly, and I just did an analysis of their site. I have no background information, so some of this stuff might be inaccurate, right? I'm not writing the code for their site or anything. But just from looking at it from a public perspective, did not even go into the inspect element. Right at the top of the page, we had we had the nav bar. And the nav bar had links on it, of course, and like a login link and all this type of thing. And these links could be powered by the existence of pages that it links to. And this is an example of dynamic data. A page in the CMS could simply have a toggle switch that will show and hide it from the nav bar. And the deletion of that page or the toggling off of that switch will not result in a broken link, like as if you statically put a link there. Example, if you had an About Us page and you went in and you designed in your HTML and in your CSS, you have buttons, and I put right in the HTML an About Us button. And then the About Us page gets deleted. That About Us button is still going to be there. But in this example, it's entirely possible that About Us page only shows up in the menu because there's a toggle switch that says show this in the menu. And then if that toggle switch gets toggled off, it disappears. If the About Us page gets deleted, that button disappears, and it's preventing a broken link. Now, I don't know if AutoTrader has a static or more so static navbar or a dynamic one, but very well could be dynamic. And in WordPress, you can say add new pages automatically to my menus and then have my menus automatically appear at the top. You see where this dynamic data is starting to sort of trickle down and spill over into other areas. So back to our example. Below that nav bar, we had a banner for thecharge.ca, which is some sort of electric car thing. I didn't actually check that out. Now, this is more than likely static to some extent, but it could be powered dynamically by, say, some sort of banner CMS option, and maybe every user gets a different banner based on cookies or other data. Commonly, that'll happen with other websites, of course. I believe this one was static, though. So this would be if the dynamic content wasn't working for whatever reason. Like I said, this would be the one thing on this site so far that would have loaded almost for sure. Next thing here, we have the search options. So there's a big search bar there, and you can search through available cars and apply a bunch of different filters like make and model, maximum price, your postal code, whether you want the car to be new, used. And then there's a bunch of other options as well on top of an advanced search tab for even more specific searching for more than likely car enthusiasts or people that want a specific car. Now, this part is obviously more static. It's not based upon dynamic content. It's just right on the site, and it's for search. But I mean, if there wasn't any dynamic content like the cars being listed, there wouldn't be any results. So this is fed, like this search thing, which is more or less static, is fed by dynamic content. The results are. Below that search, we had 2 content boxes and an ad. One of the content boxes was for selling your car and how you can list it for free on the site. This is probably static, more than likely, because they're always going to want people to list things for free on there. Another one that was right beside it, the other content box was there, was to determine the value of your car. Also probably static, because people would want to know the value of their car and be like, hey, I could sell that. And then they'd click on the list for free button, whatever. But right beside that was an ad, which I believe was powered by Ad Choices. And this is obviously more than likely controlled remotely by some ad servicing company dynamically. So this is an example of something that is more than likely powered not by the website's CMS directly, but it's dynamic content on some sort of ad provider's side. And it remotely sort of streams in, if you will, to the AutoTrader website. Next thing here, 3 ads in a row, or 3 sponsored posts, something along those lines. I believe they were ads. I believe they were sponsored, but they were just sort of like little pieces of content. Like one was for Ford and there was some other ones, like one was for a podcast and stuff like that. So I believe it's sponsored content. Don't quote me on that, but this was more than likely dynamically served either by the local CMS or by a remote ad/sponsored page. We've done this for clients in Webflow before, where they just have a sidebar where local businesses sponsor and they get a little square and they want to put their logo in there, or say like, hey, call me, for help with building blah, 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 or whatever, building this or doing plumbing or whatever. Little sort of more not run by an ad agency, just sort of more local ads or more specific ads that people rent a little spot. So more than likely served dynamically, but maybe not. The next one here though, and this is the rest of the page, and this is including several sections of the page, really the meat and potatoes of AutoTrader. These include browse by body type section, the 2022 AutoTrader awards section, which includes things like the best overall SUV, best overall truck, things like that. Next one, latest news and reviews, which is basically a blog post listing, right? Like I said, the archive page, if you will, of listing, not an archive page, but a little thing that provides you with all these content boxes that like you can click in to read these different blog posts and these different news and different reviews. Also the new vehicle listing section, the most popular cars in Canada with filtering options by geographical area. And then there's an Our Partners little kind of carousel-like area, though it didn't move around because there's only a couple of partners. More than likely, this is powered dynamically by the CMS. And so what I'm trying to point out here is that the bulk of this website is powered by dynamic content. What's the dynamic content? Well, I mentioned there's a blog section with the news and reviews, but what else? Well, the search, probably a bunch of the nav bar, and a whole bunch of the sections I just mentioned, all powered by the post type, let's say cars, if we were to boil it down. People will list their car. They fill in a form, which is the CMS. They fill in the name of the car, the photos, all kinds of stuff. Some stuff's going to be mandatory more than likely. Some stuff's going to be optional more than likely, right? I haven't listed a car here, but all that data that's entered, then depending on how that data was entered, is this a featured car? Is this a new car, an old car, a used car? Is this a certified pre-owned car? Is this by a dealer? Is this by a private owner? Is this a classic car? What year is it? What's the make? What's the model? All this, that data gets spread out throughout the whole website. It shows up in search results that apply based on that search bar I just mentioned, maybe even Google searches. It shows up in, if it's an SUV, it'll show up in the SUV body type section, for example. And if there's no SUVs, I wouldn't be surprised if that body type doesn't even get listed in the body type section. So you can start to see how it's not just blog posts. It's like AutoTrader and many other sites require dynamic data to really run things. Otherwise, their search doesn't work. Maybe their banner works. Maybe some of the ads work. Maybe the nav bar works. But like, most of the site, and the reason why most people are there are to look at cars, and those are effectively, you can really kind of think of them as blog posts in that they're not a written post, but it's a singular page, and they're designed virtually all exactly the same, and it's a fill in the blank little template, and then that data gets scattered throughout. And the final thing on the page is the footer, of course. Same situation as the nav bar, I'd say. Could be dynamically done, could be statically done, but that's just my estimate. But you can see how something like if you had WordPress, and the very first thing I think of, going to WordPress, let's say I want to make an AutoTrader clone. Well, WordPress by default has the post type. That's for blogs. So I don't want that. So I'd make a custom post type for cars. I'd add my custom fields, which would include images, like an image array of some sort, the name of the car, the make, the model, the year, stuff like that. And then on the actual homepage, I could have dynamic little filters where I could say sort by cars that are less than 5 years old, sort by cars that have less than 100,000 kilometers on the odometer, stuff like that. This is where things start getting really powerful and start really powering full websites. Sure, on WordPress, oftentimes you have a quote unquote static page set as your homepage, but that static page has these little widgets and these little sections that are completely, if not mostly, powered by dynamic data, by dynamic content. Now, what this brief analysis sort of really points out is that dynamic content is super important in not only the local sense. So something like, let's take the little carousel with the our partners from our AutoTrader example. That's probably something real easy locally, right? There's a let's just say it's run by WordPress. AutoTrader more than likely is not WordPress. Just hypothetically, you add a post type called our partners, and literally someone logs in, they click add new partner, they type in something like Carfax, and then they upload an image, and the website is smart enough to grab that local asset and to put it on the website. And it doesn't grab the name that you typed in Carfax. That's for the CMS organization. It's smart enough to only grab that image and then maybe apply a link if applicable. So maybe the user inputs a link, and you can start to twist and change the UX and the UI there by having maybe the buttons or the links to the partners are optional. So some of the images that are going to be displayed in this carousel are clickable and some are not. And maybe some of them have a different style if they are clickable, so you can tell at a glance which ones are clickable. So there's really a lot of stuff you can do here with the design aspect, with the dynamic content aspect. And dynamic content is really at the center of it all. And we touched on it a little bit, but remote data, like Mike already talked about it with APIs, like if he's pulling from some sort of e-commerce platform, or a lot of times even people will pull things from a blog. So they'll have their main website, and maybe their main website is a web app where it searches through stuff or whatever. It's a web app, but they do have a blog. That blog might be under a subdomain, and it could be hosted somewhere completely different. It's on WordPress, and it's on this, it's on that, whatever. It's on a separate blogging platform. But that main site, that web app, might pull in the top 3 stories just to filter in. And then when people click read more on one of the top 3 stories, if they want to read it, they don't have the obvious change in domain. They don't have the obvious, like, oh, I'm on another platform. So what I'm trying to point out here is that dynamic content is important in the local sense in terms of where this website's hosted with the local CMS built in. Also the remote sense. And as a final note, this is very, very true for headless CMS, where you might buy a headless CMS service, or maybe you'll make your WordPress or make another thing, a headless CMS. And then that is, living in a server that's, 100 miles away from the other server that's delivering the pages. And in the back end, the server that's delivering the pages to the public on like the actual website itself is talking to that server that's 100 miles away, the headless CMS, to pull in that data. So it's important to realize that dynamic data is now, not all being local. It's going across remote and local means.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most of the web now is powered by some sort of dynamic content source, right? Now, to say that there are still use cases for a static website, it's becoming rarer and rarer with easier and easier to add, let's say, headless CMSs and easier platforms to work with that have dynamic content built in, like Webflow and Plasmic and all those. But there's still a niche that is supporting static websites, right? For instance, a good example would be your first developer portfolio. A lot of developer portfolios are going to be static content because as developers, we can go in and copy paste some code if we need to add a couple more blog posts, right? Like it's not a big deal for us. Should you add a whole CMS to your developer portfolio just to, be able to do that when you want to. Maybe for the experience of adding a CMS. But in terms of just usability of the site and whatever, it's not that big a deal because, again, we're developers. But a lot of times, just think about it from a bigger perspective, any company that doesn't have developers on staff, any small business, right? Any smaller corporation that just doesn't need developers on staff all the time. They have contractors. They will push heavily for dynamic content capabilities like CMSs because then they don't have to pay a developer $150,000, $200,000 a year to go and, copy paste some code for them or edit some HTML tags because a regular person, a regular employee, a marketing person is not going to be comfortable going into a code base and editing text even, let alone, taking a div and multiplying it. Not that that hasn't happened before. 100% that was a thing for a long time in probably many companies. And it's probably happening right now to some legacy websites where they just haven't integrated a CMS or they just don't have the money to rebuild their site in a CMS form. But the reality is that's just not good user experience. And it's that kind of system would lead to a lot of issues down the line for a larger company when you're constantly editing stuff. Even for a developer doing it, they could miss a tag. They could, put in the wrong alt tag here because they have to edit the file name in 3 different places. Like there could be many different issues that trickle down when you have a repeatable section that needs to be updated manually. That's why CMSs exist. That's why this is a really big and important part of the web. It's not just because, hey, we're lazy. No, it's because this is a standard across the board now for corporate websites or business websites or SaaS businesses, whatever, to have content that is repeatable so that you can easily and reliably recreate it without having to go into code and copy paste.
And on what you just said too, Mike, like sites now are powered by dynamic content. And I touched on it earlier that sites for a long time were powered by dynamic content. But dynamic content has become more and more important because we have sites that aggregate things or sites, like I said, that go across a subdomain and it's 2 different CMS and stuff like that. But we're seeing this in the CMS itself in that way back. And like Michael, remember this, we worked on Dreamweaver sites. We had not a client, but somebody approach us one time to take a look at a very old Joomla site. And it was running on PHP 5, I want to say, something like that. And they couldn't figure out how to get the CMS portion to work, or it was broken down, or something was really wrong with that site due to its age. And trying to get like a host that would run that thing it was a big mess. And what they ended up doing was somebody figured out how to, instead of using the sort of the CMS portion, which is more or less like filling out a field, they figured out how to go into sort of the visual editor and just edit things manually. And so when they had like the latest stories or what have you, they were manually put in. They weren't actually the latest stories by date, actually the latest stories by featured toggle or something. They were just featured stories because somebody visually went in there. And this is where, CMSs have started changing and how things have started sort of getting more open over the years, where even in WordPress, I feel as though, I don't know about old WordPress. I haven't really used an old WordPress installation for a number of years, but WordPress today, having just built a site in it from scratch very recently, as I think last month, as of recording this, something like that, it feels very open, where I at least know where stuff is, and it will warn me of stuff like, hey, if you touch this, this could break things. And it lets me know because it knows, the CMS knows I'm going to go into all these areas and start touching things because I need to pull data. I need to add functions. I need to make new shortcodes. I need to do this and that. It knows I need all this data. Whereas back in the day with the old Joomlas, the old Dreamweavers with templates that get locked down, and then there's multiple templates within a website and this and that, it starts getting really confusing and it's very hard to tell what's going on. And it was largely, I would say, because obviously web development's in its infancy back then. And a side effect of that is that the dynamic data was around, but people weren't really pulling on it. And they would just create another template if they needed to. Oh, I'll just create another Dreamweaver template and, embed it here. And I don't want anyone to touch it, so I'll lock it in whatever method that is. And then another Dreamweaver version comes out, another one, 3 versions down the road. Oh, now that other one can't be unlocked by this, and it's locked behind this, which is locked behind this, which is locked behind this. And it becomes this really like not open environment where it's like, I can't, like if someone calls us, says, I want to change this button. I could be there for 9 hours. 9 hours trying to figure out how to change a button. And I can't do it. Can that happen in WordPress? Oh yeah. Yeah, it can. But it's getting there where it's getting to the point where I can at least be like, hey, I'm going to go in there and just like sloppily, but like as a band-aid for you, I'll like CSS hide it and then CSS show another one. And we could just do that for the time being. So because you have like an event coming up or what have you, right? So CMSs are definitely evolving with dynamic content in mind. And with that, I want to touch on designing a CMS with dynamic content in mind. Now, I'm not talking about literally building a CMS. I'm talking about a CMS that's, say, a blank slate, like a Webflow, like a WordPress custom post type, stuff like that, and a number of other things, headless CMSs out there, where you're basically told, like, okay, like, what fields do you want your user to be able to fill in? Couch CMS is another great example. It's the first one we use like this. Which fields do you want your user to be able to fill in? And I recently wrote an article about this called Content Boxes Have a Design Problem. And that's available on htmlthings.com as well as Hashnode and Medium. A shameless self-plug, I guess. But I specifically talked about content boxes. And I was talking about how content boxes are dynamically designed throughout a website, meaning that they're styled differently on the featured stories page versus the sidebar versus just the news section. Just an example. And in this article, I talked about some tactics that I use to help my CMS experience so that users that have very technical or very limited technical knowledge, potentially, they're content creators. They're not web developers. They want to be able to edit their content, create their content right on here. So I try to really kind of provide them with a good UX. Now, I'm not, the end all be all best UX person. Of course not. But I try to keep things not overbearing. I don't want to keep asking them for things. I don't want to leave the door open for major mistakes. I want the mistakes that they make to be content based. Like, whoops, I accidentally uploaded the wrong picture. Oh, I accidentally made a typo. I don't want them to be like, whoops, accidentally upload a file and I got the WordPress white screen of death, and they have to engage you. That's a liability, right? So, well, my article that I mentioned is focused on content boxes and the combination of dynamic design and dynamic content, right? Ultimately, the design changes within them. So like to break up the monotony of just like looking at a rectangle with a title, rectangle with a title, rectangle with a title, rectangle with a title. The dynamic design changes it up. So users can go through the website and they have big content boxes, little content boxes, this content box, that content box. But we have to remember that dynamic design is powered by dynamic content. They're two separate things, but they're very related. And because everything is dynamic, as Mike and I just discussed, dynamic design and dynamic content go hand in hand. And you have to take this rather complex sort of concoction, if you will, and translate this into a CMS. You have to make it so that someone who is not tech savvy goes in and says, what the heck is an open graph image? What the heck is this thing? What's an SEO image? What's an SEO title? And stuff like that. So my tips for this, and I have 5 of them, and I'll just list them out and then I'll describe them. So the first one is descriptive helper text. So helper text is when you have let's say you have a title field. So it's just a text field and you label it as title, article title, something like that. The helper text will generally appear right below the title of that field. So the title, it'll appear right below that, and it will give them something more. It'll give them something more descriptive. So it'll say stuff like, hey, this is, a maximum of 55 characters. Please use initial caps. Please use this, APA capitalization method, stuff like that. It's supposed to help guide them. And really specifically, it's supposed to help guide them if they have a question as to what something is. So when it comes to a title, they're not gonna care. But some bloggers will use the term subtitle, and some bloggers will use the term byline. Well, somebody might be confused. They might have worked at one blog their whole life. Now they come over to work for you, and they're like, "Man, I've always used the word subtitle. What's a byline?" So the byline can be ironed out with the descriptive helper text, and you can literally write something like, "This displays right below the title, acts as a subtitle." Stuff like that. Something that's just, quick, brief, and that type of thing. The next tip I have here is to reduce liability. So I've already mentioned, having something where the user can easily accidentally crash the entire website. This is easier said than done, and I'll describe why in a minute. But we want to reduce our liability in that we want the content, the CMS, to only really touch the content, if you will. We want the CMS we want the liability to be in the typos and in, accidentally upload the wrong image, like I said. We do not want someone to have access, say, to full custom backend code editor. An example would be in WordPress. Maybe, it's hard to get the user role editor tuned just so. And, you're sick of it. Your content creators keep bugging you. You have a new site and the authors are like, man, I can't upload images. Like, what's going on? And you mess with the permissions and you just can't get it to work. And so it's easy to just say, screw it. I'm going to make them an admin. Yeah, you're going to make them an admin and you're also going to make them a huge liability. What happens if you run a site that has a heck of a lot of plugins and maybe some of them are old and they're old for a reason because the new ones don't work right? And all of a sudden you're going to reduce, all of a sudden they can take down the entire website. They can take down the entire site because they can go in and be like, oh, WordPress has an update. And they click update and it's like, oh, help, and just break everything. That's a liability. And the reason why I say this is easier said than done is because sometimes when you inherit a website, the users don't want to give up their account and they don't want to give up their power. Even though they don't touch the updates, they don't want to touch this and that. They want to keep their account and they want maybe everyone to use the same account or whatever it is. And so there's sort of an office bureaucracy and office politic thing there where, you have liabilities where everyone signing as an admin because that's just the way things have been and that's the way they want things. But there's ways to reduce their liability with things just like fields, field limits and field requirements and things like, hey, you can't go above 55 characters. Hey, this field is limited, or hey, this field is optional. Hey, this field is required. And that leads right into my next tip, which is flexible requirements and strict limits. So we've already talked about liability, but what does it mean to be flexible and strict at the same time? Well, you can say, have your SEO title you have an SEO title field. It's a title. It's just a text field. You have your helper text and it says, we recommend this to be 55 characters, but it maxes out at 60. Okay. So someone types something in and it's 65 characters. It doesn't let them go past 60 characters, period. So what this does is this allows the content creator to read the requirement and work on their content to get it as close to the requirement or let's say the recommended as much as they can. But if they just cannot get that title down to 55 characters and it ends up being 57, hey, they put the work in, it's at 57, the system's not going to block them, it's not going to break anything, and they're going to publish it. And so this is an example, once again, of flexible requirements and strict limits. The requirement is that this is an SEO-friendly title. Here's what we recommend as disclosed in the helper text. And we're not going to let you put a bad SEO title in. We're not going to let you go above 60 characters. That type of thing. The next one here, only add fields when necessary. So I mentioned dynamic design, and with dynamic design comes a whole bunch of different images and different portrait or different orientations like portrait and landscape and different sizes and all kinds of stuff. And if you go to my article once again on htmlthings.com, I go through an example of one day I went on IGN.com and I took some screenshots of the different content boxes and the different areas that they had on the website. And I had this, kind of realization that, hey, there's a big banner image and then this one's a portrait and this one's in landscape and this one's small and this one's big. And so it's easy to just go through, let's say, that design. And when you're writing down your CMS design, let's say you sort of jot it down for organization purposes before implementing it, you might have 3, 4, 5 image recommendation fields. Like you might have a bunch of them in there and be like, man, not image recommendation, image uploading fields. You're asking the user for a portrait image, a landscape image, a large image, a small image, a compressed image, and the list goes on. And you could do this with text too in certain contexts. And it just starts getting a little bit ridiculous. And so what I say is I offload that to the CMS. So Many CMS, when you upload an image, it'll make multiple versions, a small, medium, large, original, whatever. So it'll do that, high DPI, low DPI. So you use those, but also use CSS. So maybe the user needs to upload 2 images such that they have a portrait image and a landscape image, because cropping them doesn't really work. But everything else you can handle with just, say, background size cover, and that's it. And then you can go in with your CSS and you kind of change which version of the image you're using. You can go in and you can change like how much of a border radius it has and what the size is and stuff like this. And sometimes you do need another field, right? You don't want to have somebody upload a 10 megabyte image and have that image be, the end all be all for every single version so that CSS can crop it, this and that. You're going to start hurting site performance. But my point is don't be asking just because it's convenient, be like, oh, you know what? I'll like put the inconvenience of multiple styles on the user of the CMS, on the CMS user. I'll put it on them, and then I don't have to worry about it. It's like, no. Like, you do your computing and your development, and then whittle it down to 1 or 2 fields if you can. Only when necessary, add fields. Because more fields is more chances for mistakes. 100%. And the last one here, my last tip, is be mindful of backward compatibility. So one of the things we learned in college was try not to hard code things. What does that mean? When you hard code something, let's say, for example, you have a light switch. Well, it's a 0 and a 1, on and off, right? On and off. 1 is on and 0 is off. So what you do is you can write up code where it specifically addresses just that light switch. It specifically looks for the voltage on just that light switch. It specifically looks on just that pin, because we're talking about circuitry. It's so specific that it's hard coded so that it will only work on that switch, or maybe switches that are near identical or literally identical to that type. Alternatively, you could have a function that checks if a voltage is present, a 1 or a 0, and then that's more modular. You can take that and apply it to other circuits, either fully or in part. Only hard code the things you absolutely need to hard code. Soft code as many things as you can to make it more modular. How does this apply to CMSs though? Doesn't sound like it does. It absolutely does. If you have something like a holiday special week on your blog, and you have a field in there that will always apply, say, a red background to the background of your blog post. Let's just say it's Christmas, hooray. So you put up your red background. Well, in future designs, maybe, blogs iterate, they change, they age, and designers come in, they move it. That might be a completely, and I mean completely useless feature in a future design. And you have a field for it there. It's useless because they're not doing it like that anymore. But you could, and the thing is you could just do that in CSS. But to have somebody literally come in and have a color picker, and it's like, oh, make sure you choose red. And not only are you opening it up to, not only are you opening it up to, error, where somebody might accidentally choose like brown or like green or something like that. You're also, it's just like, why would I hard code this in so specifically? And then another thing is let's say, for example, you hard code in a bunch of fields. So you hard code in, a byline or a subtitle, a short one and a long one. And you use this for widescreens, like a desktop, and a cell phone, which is in portrait rather slim. And so you have a short one and a long one because you don't want to truncate it. You don't want it to wrap. Well, that's kind of messy, and that's hard coded, and that's really specific. And what you really should do is either limit it to just the short byline, or have CSS truncate it, or have CSS style it so it doesn't look as bad with wrapping. Because when the blog iterates in design, maybe this byline doesn't matter anymore. And maybe the byline becomes, we only want short ones. Now you're doing a bunch of data entry. You're moving, you're making a new subtitle field, and you're moving the byline or the short byline data to that, or stuff like that. And this applies not just to text and images. This absolutely applies to things like toggle switches, where if you have a toggle switch that, makes, the title appear for some reason, And then in future designs, you're like, the title should always appear. It's like, are you really going to get rid of that toggle switch? And then you're going to have to like change the logic because the default position is not to show the title. So now you're going to have everyone force the toggle on. And then you see where the technical debt and all these problems start adding up. So be mindful of backwards compatibility, but also forwards compatibility in that make your fields generic. Make your fields be like, hey, featured image, title, byline, subtitle, whatever, main content, featured image, stuff like that. I probably repeated one of those twice, but stuff like that goes a long way in keeping the CMS not super dated and not filled with old data or just too many fields. And it just starts getting really technical debt filled.
Yeah. And just to build on that last point, I have another kind of tip for you is to create patterns and follow those patterns throughout your content editable fields. So for instance, if you have a need for having a mobile image and a desktop image, right, in your blog post and maybe in your product page, make it so that, the mobile image is first and the desktop image is second, and keep it that way across all of your custom content posts. Right? Because then when an editor comes in, they know exactly that, okay, anytime they see these two, the first one will always be mobile, the second one will always be desktop. They don't have to think about it. As soon as you make them think, it takes them out of any sort of flow state they're in, it takes them out, and they could screw it up as well. So it's the same thing with like heading, subheading. Heading's always on top, subheading's always on the bottom, right? It's the same thing with any sort of customization that you provide to any sort of field. Just make sure that it lines up across your entire site, so that they're not going in and it's like all of a sudden everything's a jumbled mess in all the different custom types. You want to keep it as low, the lowest barrier of entry as possible for people, because people will screw it up no matter what. But the idea is that if you make it simple and make it consistent by following patterns, it's going to be easier for the content editors. That's the goal of a CMS. Right? The CMS is great. You can, if it can provide a bunch of features and all that, but the goal is to make it so that the content editors can edit the content as efficiently as possible. Second tip that I have is create a onboarding process for content editors. So when a new content editor, like a marketing person, or whoever's going to be touching the CMS comes in, they have either a video that they can watch with some sort of flow of how you to edit content and how to test it as well. That's another big one. Test the content. But essentially, you either have a video, you have a set of documentation, so you have written articles, or you just take them through like a 30-minute session one-on-one with them just to show them all the different little nuances. Because no matter how generic you make it, no matter how dynamic you make it, no matter what, there's going to be little nuances of being like, okay, you know what, on this specific component, you want to make sure to, put in just enough words here. Otherwise it's going to look really weird down the line. There's going to be little things that are going to potentially screw up the flow, and they could come in, 2 months down the line if you don't set expectations from the start. So it helps a lot for the actual person that's editing content just to see how it's done initially, or even like sit with them while they do their first edits as well, just to make sure that they're going through the right processes and see that they're doing everything correctly. And the testing part, I just want to touch on that a little bit. It's really important to show them how to like preview their drafts, because a lot of times content editors will go in, type in all their content, hit publish and walk away. Sometimes they won't even check the live site. Sometimes they will. But it's important for them to review the drafts not only on desktop, which is 99% of the time where they're going to be editing the content, but make sure that they can view their draft on mobile. So show them how they can do that, either through the console inspect element tools where you can change the size, or if there's a draft link, how they can send that to their phone so that they can actually see the draft on their phone. Adding these steps, I did this recently to the content editing site that I'm working on, has helped reduce the number of random issues that we've had post publication down to like 1 a month. When I first joined, it was like 3 a week that people were just like, oh my God, on mobile, the image doesn't show up, or it overlaps or something like that. Well, you didn't check it on mobile. That's why. and you didn't tell anyone that you published. So you have to have these processes in place. You have to have an onboarding process. You have to have a checking, like testing process, all so that you avoid all the issues that can come with custom content.
When you were talking about your first tip as well, I wanted to jump in because there's something that like I didn't touch on, but is really important. And that is that kind of the glanceability in the context and where you are in the CMS. Obviously, if you're in a blog post and you're editing a post, you're in that context, but you can be in like sort of a sub context. And one of the things that we did for a Webflow client, and Webflow really should have conditional visibility in the CMS. I'm going to call them out for that right now. But what we did was we had this particular client will share, other people's articles, and I call it like the third party link mode or something. And in say like a WordPress situation, I would have conditional visibility where I would have a toggle and be like, are you sharing someone else's content? If the answer to that's yes, and you toggle it to yes, more fields show up and you share their link, you share their image, you share whatever it is you need to share. It keeps them in there. Now, Webflow CMS does not have this conditional visibility, but what I do is in square brackets, I put like third party link mode in each of the titles of the fields so that in a glance, they're not going, hey, hang on a second. This is a link, but I already put a link somewhere else. Which one is the third party link mode using? It's just something that's just like a little bit of UX and a little bit of, something to add. And it touches on Mike's point too, where, people checking the drafts on that, which I think was a great point. Actually, I didn't really think of that, checking the drafts on that. But one thing as well is I would go through yourself and pretend or literally try to publish a piece of content. Because when I was publishing just this content box thing, I've published articles before, but even then, I missed images, I missized some, because every single blog platform requires you to tailor it just so to them, a little bit change for Medium, a little bit change for Webflow, a little bit different here, a little bit different there. And so like really going through and testing exactly what you're doing is super crucial. And you'll notice when you're going through, you'll notice like, whoa, this is really confusing. Or whoa, like I really should have something like a better label than just featured image. Like what does featured image do? Maybe I need to add some helper text here. It'll allow you to see the shortcomings and allow you to sort of make the CMS and make CMS, have a better UX and whittle down hopefully those amount of fields. Now, the final sort of section here I have for today is the problem with dynamic content. So dynamic content sounds like it's great. You publish an article and you have a bunch of authors publishing articles and then your whole site fills up. And you're like, woo, I didn't have to run all that stuff. All my writers did it. This is great. This is everything. But there's always a problem. There's always a problem. And I want to kind of focus in on, for at least Mike has a point as well later, but for my point, I want to focus in on what we, the web developer, web designer, can mess up here easily. And that is that once you learn how to create websites that are powered with dynamic content and like going into being plugged into dynamic design, like the different types of content boxes, it's very easy to get carried away with CMS experiences that should otherwise be simple. So this is, I'm anonymizing names and stuff like this in details, but we once had a project with Couch CMS where I had at that point used it a whole bunch for a number of months. I really learned the ins and outs of it. I learned how to get different flags and different dynamic data and learned what would toggle what and all this stuff. And so with all this knowledge, we got a client, and the client, I had a school, and the school basically had multiple locations, and I thought, okay, great. What I'm going to do is sometimes the locations would close, right? There's no course running in this city. So that location's closed temporarily, and this type of thing. It's kind of like a traveling, lesson. They rent out a hall, do a lesson, go here, rent out a hall, do a lesson, that type of thing. And so I thought, okay, great. What I'll do is in their servicing area, they told me that they literally would like to close them and open them and show and this and that. So I thought, okay, great. What I'll do is I'll make it dynamic so that when they enter in an upcoming course in a city, like let's say Hamilton will automatically show up as an area they service. If they do not have anything scheduled for Hamilton, that Hamilton location is effectively closed, and they closed that. Because that's what I got from them. When they looked at it, and I had spent a bunch of time designing this system out because we had a bunch of Like I had a number of months on my belt, but I was still kind of new. And like I built this whole thing out, and then they looked at it and they said, well, how, like I can't open and close these locations. And I said, no, it does it. It dynamically opens and closes these locations. If you have an event, it just does it. It knows you're open. It knows you're closed. But I hadn't done my due diligence in getting all the user requirements. And they said, no, we want to be able to open and close them. You're right. But the number one problem here is that sometimes we leave it open even without an event. And the reason why we do that is because we're looking to gauge interest in an area and are willing to, if we get, say, 10 students, to run something in Hamilton or run something in another city. And that was like a huge thing. It's like, oh, so you literally need the more, let's say, the more simple, just this location, this location, this location, this location. You actually don't want a dynamic solution, because sometimes the parameter I had set is like, if an event exists, show this. The event sometimes does not exist. And so this is where you can kind of start getting yourself into trouble. This is a pretty simple example, but it's still something that's like kind of more advanced than just your basic dynamic content example. And it starts to mess things up. So what I would do in this particular case to correct this is, I think I corrected it in some degree, and then they gave some concessions, because some of them were like, hey, this is actually kind of handy that we don't have to keep toggling switches. So I think there was like a half step done in correction. But just really kind of, if something's going to take a little while, like that part took a decent amount of time, in comparison to the rest of the site, I would honestly like take a look and like have a conversation with them and be like, I'm taking a look at doing it like this. Is this okay or no? And like kind of check in whenever possible. Or if you think of it right in that initial meeting, think of yourself like, like, should I do this? And I have one more example of this. We're working on a site, or about to start working on a site, and they have someone who is going to come in and do their blog posts for them. And their website needs to be repaired in that some of the data went missing. I'm not sure exactly what happened. Some of the data went missing a number of months ago. And we're coming in for the first time, and I'm going to be filling in this information. One of the things in there is a collection of testimonials. Now, what I want to do is add a custom post type in WordPress and add a bunch of custom fields to it. And I want to make a testimonials thing so that they can dynamically have testimonials. And I had that in my initial my initial document, when doing my technical analysis and eventual quote of the site and what I thought needed to be done. Having slept on it, which I almost always do with these type of things, I try to sleep on it, then reread it. I kind of realized to myself, the person that is doing the work said that she doesn't really want, like, she's not super tech savvy. She needs some training, and a lot of this stuff isn't going to change much. And so do I really want to add the custom post type, the advanced custom fields? Like, do I want to add CPT UI, which is not installed, custom post type UI, which is a WordPress plugin, ACF, advanced custom fields, which is also a WordPress plugin? Do I want to add those, maintain those, because I have to update them periodically, of course? Do I really want to do that? And then add a custom thing that they may never, ever touch. And it's sort of like, is this dynamic content at this point? Like, it can be powered by dynamic content, but is it dynamic content? And I've decided against it because it's easy to add later, but I feel like they're not going to do it. I feel like they might update their testimonials like once every 5 years or something. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'll confirm that in the final stages. Like I said, always ask questions and stuff like that. But just think of it that way, and think of it like, hey, I can make this dynamic. Well, that's great, but should you? Think about the should. Should I be doing this? So just one or a couple little stories there of where dynamic content, and especially your knowledge of handling dynamic content, can get you into trouble. And Mike had one more point here, and I'll just read out the point, and I'll let him take it away with it. And that is that there's a line here, and the line is or actually, I guess the question is, where is the line? What's the line between content creator freedoms and limiting those freedoms for the design and possibly the UX of the website user? Do you allow content creators to upload super mega, like super high quality, absolutely massive imagery, but then the user, that's the website user, it's going to take forever to load? Or the website host, you're going to have to update the package because you're uploading these massive images and it's 40 times the size you normally have it, stuff like that. So where's the line in telling the content creator, no, like we could allow you to do this, but no. Where's that line and what's that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one that I'm still battling with, honestly. The line is very much in a very big gray area for me, depending on the project, because of editors like Webflow, that allow you to do essentially anything to the website. And you can give that access to your client, right? Like you can give editor access to your client, not just CMS, where they can go in and literally like change the colors of everything and add a whole new page or like, change up the page. Should you do that to a typical client? I would say 90% of the time the answer is going to be no. You should not give full editor access to a typical client. A typical client in this case is a standard content editor, a marketing person, someone that has no idea about the development UX and UI. So they are not a designer. They are just a content editor. For them, sometimes you're going to get pushback. I'm just going to say it flat out. I've had it before where they're like, well, I need to add this dynamic piece of content that just doesn't fit into this content box. Like this blog post doesn't accept a certain block of text that I need to be added into like 3 columns. Let's say I need a 3-column piece of text. Back before, when you designed that blog post, it never had any intention of having 3 columns anywhere in it. So their pushback to you is, we need these 3 columns to display this, whatever. This is where it gets really complicated because they're like, well, just allow me to put in whatever I want. Like, I just want to be able to edit the site exactly the way I want it every single time. Your pushback has to be, listen, the site has to look good on mobile, has to look good on desktop. It has to look cohesive so that every page kind of looks like it belongs together. You have to be able to come up with reasonings and determinations of why you can't do that. Plus, the more custom you make these pages, the more likely stuff will break. So the more columns you allow, for instance, the more likely that 1 or 2 columns might look bad. The more likely that 4 columns might look bad. The more likely that your bold text might overlap. Like there's so many, the more customization, the more variables you're adding for stuff to interfere with each other. So depending on the budget, that could be a restraint, right? So you could be like, listen, I can't give you full customization because I would have to essentially build you a what you see is what you get editor for every component. You can't do that on a limited budget. Or you have to go to a different tool. So this is why it's important to get the requirements, like Matt was saying, really early on and solidified. Because once you explain to them very deliberately, like, hey, this is how it's going to look. A blog post is going to be a single column, right? A blog post, here's, a couple examples of what a blog post can look like. But when they come back to you and ask you to add in a graph, a dynamic graph, and be like, why can't I add this dynamic graph based on this data that I've provided to the system? You have to be able to either come up with a quote for adding that, I guess, or a rebuttal being like, listen, that's going to make all the other blog posts look different, right? So it's just one of those challenges that you're going to be facing on a continual basis, depending on who your content editors are. Now, having said that, a content editor could be the design head of the website, the person that gave you all the Figma files. Right? If that's a content editor, then you can start thinking about, okay, how do I, do something a little bit different? And maybe they do get editor access in Webflow. Or maybe you go to a system like Plasmic where you can do a WYSIWYG on every component, right? So again, the requirements have to determine where that line is, but you also have to provide your logic and reasoning about like a random marketing person or a random content editor shouldn't have access to this stuff because your site is going to look bad. At the end of the day, it's really not fully up to you. If the client has the money and they have the determination that they want their content editors to be able to edit whatever they like, then you go ahead and build them with that, but you leave them with disclaimers of being like, listen, 3 months down the line, when someone adds 6 blog posts that all look different, they might interfere with each other for instance. Like there might be a situation where those content boxes could, like just the cards could be an issue if they have like 2 or 3 images instead of 1 or something. Like if you give them infinite customization, they have to be expecting issues no matter what the situation is, right? It's either going to take them a long time to set something up, set up a single blog post, or it's going to be a disaster when they put it all into one place, like when all the cards are linking together. So it's a give and take. It's a problem I don't have a full solution to quite yet, but I am finding that it is a line that you have to draw in the early stages of the requirements process, because if you complete the system, like Matt was saying with Couch CMS situation, and all of a sudden they have this ask at the end of the day that requires you to redesign the whole thing, that's going to be a massive issue between you and the client. And it's just the reality of it. These CMSs are not easy to work with for the most part, especially when you have to add customization into them.
Well, imagine this too, Mike, like with your situation where you have, generally a single column and someone wants to add a 3-column design. Well, some people are probably thinking right now, well, I'll just reach for another field or another selection, another thing of fields where I'll have my let's say my title, my subtitle, my main content, and then I'll have my 3 columns in some sort of setup in the CMS. Well, once again, this is, first of all, you're adding problems, because what if they want main content to start and then 3 columns to be in the middle and then the main content to go back to 1 column again? Like, what if they want that? But even if that's not the case and they always want the 3 columns at the end, is the 3 columns really going to stick around? Like, is it going to be something that when the next design comes out in a few years, is 3 columns considered acceptable at all? And if it isn't, now you have 3 fields, column 1, column 2, column 3. Now what are you doing with that? Are you adding a new main column and then having to data entry all that out so that you can delete those 3 fields? This is technical debt like 101, and adding too many fields 101 too. There has to be the back and forth, like Mike said. There's the office politics, which I mentioned as well, where sometimes, no, like this person wants admin role, they have admin role, right? But there's just times, like 100%, there's just these times where things just do not, like, you need to have it out with the designer or the content creators. Absolutely. Not have a full blown argument or something, but have a serious talk and say, hey, if I do this is what this is going to do. And sometimes like Figma it for them or something and be like, if I do this is what this is going to do. If you're okay with this, I'm, CCing your manager on this thread so that when in 3 months, this does not work, which is what I think is going to happen. I get paid, cause you're a contractor, I get paid the, time to fix it. Cause I'm telling you not to do this. Stuff like that. Just, keep, there's always a back and forth. Unless it's your project, you're not going to have full control, but it absolutely is, you absolutely should have again, I always keep on saying argument, but you absolutely should have a debate with the content creators if they're, asking for something that is technically not viable or not recommended for whatever reason. But that concludes this episode. I do have one video that I did watch, and I'm going to link it in the show notes. It is I accidentally closed it, so I like right away just closed it. I was like, oh man, I'll pull up this YouTube video and like I'll be able to like tell you what it is. Hang on, let me just pull it up so I can give the proper shout out here. But it is the basics of dynamic content in 15 minutes by Living with Pixels. So I watched the majority of this video, not the whole thing, but it was my inspiration to make this on top of the fact that I had already written my content box article before I watched this. So I'll be linking that in the show notes as well. But if there's nothing else to add, I think it is time to end. And if you want to support episodes like this, shows like this, remember we are on Patreon. That's patreon.com/HTML, all the things. And many thanks to our $3 tier patrons. Ryan Gatchell from Blue Black Digital on blueblackdigital.com. Chris from Self Made Web Designer on selfmadewebdesigner.com. Tim from The Web Hacker on thewebhacker.com. DL Ford from dlford.io. Vib#9block Media, 9blockmedia.com. Jason from Geek Life Radio via geekliferadio.com. Michael Curie from MC Web Studio via mncwebstudio.ca. Magnus from YesWeb via yesweb.se. Jeff from Twitter via @TheJeffandKale. And Fire Ant Season via fireantseason.com. Feel free to leave a comment or review on the platform you're listening to this on. And we are signing off.
You've been listening to HTML All the Things Podcast. Web development, web design, and small business. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show, and we hope you appreciate that we talk to you like human beings, and we hope you had some fun. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hit us up on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at HTML All the Things, and on Twitter at HTML Everything. Until next time, this is HTML All the Things, signing off.